back to Cinematic. I'm Ryan. Feels like it's been a while since I've done one of these for some reason. I guess maybe that's what the Guyver does to a man, but it also turns him into an unstoppable killing machine. Go check out last week's show. This week we're doing Once Upon a Time in China, finally. And I think this might be the longest I've ever taken to watch one of these movies, because a lot of times I'm pausing, I'm going back and forth, I'm Wikipedia, I'm looking up, I'm like, oh, and then this leads to that, leads to another rabbit hole. So that might translate into a little bit of long-windedness, but I'll try to keep it moving. Once Upon a Time in China is a Choi Hark movie who we've talked about. We did an episode on Zoo Warriors from the Magic Mountain. He came up again when I was talking about John Woo, about how John Woo's kind of down in the dumps, and Choi Hark was like, come, make whatever movie you want to make, and that was A Better Tomorrow. Although it seems that some bad blood developed between that and The Killer, because Choi kind of tried to stymie that, it seems. But also, and this I didn't know until I was looking up more about Choi Hark, he directed A Better Tomorrow 3. So after kind of getting on the outs with Woo, he directed the third in that series. Kind of seems there's probably a story behind that. But Choi Hark is still a huge name, and one that I think I'm pronouncing correctly at this point. I spent a good long while with Tsui, and I apologize, but I believe I'm closer with Choi. Hopefully I can stick with that throughout this episode. But here he's trying his hand at a Wong Fei-hung movie. And I actually thought I had talked about more Wong Fei-hung movies than I have. He's shown up as a character in more than a few, but I guess technically I haven't spoken, unless you count, I guess, Drunken Master, but I didn't do that, strictly speaking. But this is like a far more patriotic one. Wong Fei-hung, you can go back and listen to, I think strangely enough, the episode I did on Prodigal Son, which is not a Wong Fei-hung movie, and I don't remember if he shows up as a character. Sorry, it was Dreadnought and The Magnificent Butcher where he showed up, but that's where I also would have talked about Wong Fei-hung in some respect. But Chinese Folk Hero and Hung Ga Master and et cetera, go check out those episodes. In Once Upon a Time in China, he's played by Jet Li. So it begins why I say it's one of the more patriotic movies about Wong Fei-hung, is because it begins on a ship where a traditional lion dance is being performed, and some boat idiots nearby think the firecrackers are guns, so they shoot and injure some of the actors, and Wong Fei-hung risks his life to complete the traditional dance in, spectacular fashion. So right after that, the naval commander pretty much tasks him with the mission of the movie. He opens this fan that he has that has recorded all these unequal treaties on it, and says, erase these treaties, build up this army of brave men, kind of defend Chinese heritage, and roll the opening credits. So as you might have gathered, this is also a return to the period picture for Hong Kong action, or at least for this series. There were probably a lot of movies coming out of there, so I don't know how, certainly with Jackie and Samuel's New Wave, that's where we went. So it is strange to me to read that this movie was also responsible for a bit of a boom, a bit of a return to the period picture for Hong Kong, because it seems like we barely left from my point of view. So this particular one takes place in the late 19th century. The Manchus are in charge, and the 20th century is encroaching. Foreign boats line the coast, some of which had those idiots I talked about from before. And the country itself is at a crossroads. The culture itself is at a crossroads. History looms large in this one. So I love it. For instance, Wong Fei-hung Goes to Town, which is another alternate title for this movie, I would say, and finds Rosamund Kwan, actually, by the way, from Tiger Cage 2, having just returned from Europe with all sorts of strange customs, like shaking hands and this camera that is, kind of like magic, basically. And Wong Fei-hung is kind of charmingly aloof to it all, although that grows more and more untenable as the movie goes on and kind of evil men conspire. But before we get there, Yin Biao is also in this movie. He plays Ling Fung, and it's a pretty spot-on Yin Biao character, kind of young and inexperienced, but eager, seeking a martial arts instructor in the form of Wang Fei-hung actually goes to his Po Chi Lam, which is his martial club, but also his clinic. Because if you remember, Wang Fei-hung is a doctor. If you remember, pretty much every Wang Fei-hung movie is actually about an action hero doctor, which kind of sounds funny because if that were done, and probably has been done in America, has it? Yeah, the American version of that is some guy in scrubs with like a stethoscope in one hand and a machine gun in the other. Here it's a more natural part of the whole. You know, Kung Fu is violent or can be violent, but it's also spiritually sound. It can also be a manifestation of justice or balance, probably better yet. Symbol of rebellion, even independence, heritage, like I mentioned up top. So yeah, kind of everything the movie sets up at the beginning. So yeah, Wang Fei-hung is our action hero doctor here, and as such, his action hero apprentice also makes an appearance. And I really liked The Magnificent Butcher, the movie. I like how Sammo portrayed him there, but I love how Kent Chang portrays him here. He is kind of this impetuous character. He's always going off. Wang Fei-hung always has to kind of rein him in, but he's also just a complete tank in a fight. Like, he's not, you know, doing anything really technically impressive, but he's such a good complement, especially in those fights where he is with Wang Fei-hung, Jet Li, who is very technically competent. The stuff that Kent Chang does is just perfect. He's a delight in this thing. And speaking of the action, this is not a nonstop action epic. Honestly, it takes about 40 minutes. Like, it's in there. You can see the choreography throughout in a lot of things that are going on, but the first out and out fight doesn't happen until about 40 minutes in, and it's Wang Fei-hung, Jet Li with an umbrella that he is just cleaning up the bar with. It's great. And he's doing it against the Shah gang, which is kind of these group of locals that have placed themselves in opposition to Wang Fei-hung, but they burn down Po Chi Lam, straight up. Like, they torch a hospital, essentially, which propels Wang Fei-hung into action. So Wang Fei-hung is a pacifist pretty much in this movie. You get the feeling he doesn't want to fight when he doesn't have to, like any good kung fu master. But he also, again, with the encroaching modernity, you could say, has found himself at a crossroads where he's trusting in the system that he's known for so long, and in the governorship to some extent as well, and finds himself increasingly needing to make a decision. And I might be simplifying things, but I think Choi Hark is aware of it, because I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say it with all of the love in the world. He's got a bit of a Michael Bay-ishness to him in the way, like lots of low angles. He's not afraid of a cinematic needle drop, so to speak. Like Zoo Warriors, if you think about it. I also get the feeling that he cares about history. You know, this isn't the 3 sheets to the wind approach of something like Pearl Harbor. Kind of like I talked about how John Woo and Ringo Lam have their Western sensibilities. Choi Hark is probably number 3 on that list, and he also had his American stint with movies like Knock Off and Double Team, which I hope we get to do. They're Van Damme movies. I think, is it Double Team, the one with... Okay, yeah, Double Team is with Dennis Rodman, but Knock Off is actually with Rob Schneider. So both of them cinematically unassailable, and I hope we do them. This is going to get long-winded. I feel like I'm not even I have like a semi-problem with this that I don't have really, you know, that thing that I do. But the production on this thing is outstanding, but not flashy. Like, we've lost a lot of the bright colors. We might have fully entered the earth tones era of Hong Kong action, quite possibly, although I guess that maybe came with John Woo, but this is not like a Shaw Brothers, or especially like a Chang Cheh movie that is just looks fantastic and iconic, but the colors are just bright, and I don't know, maybe some of it's the grading as well. This is intricate and looks great both in close-up, but also in wide angle. In fact, I should just be talking about an actual example from the movie. So Yen Bio is an actor in this. He's touring with a troupe, and they put on an opera, and in that scene, you've got the entrance where tickets are being taken, people are coming in. You've got the stage, which looks just gorgeous, but you've got the audience on one side, and then on the other side, there are not only the actors and backstage, there's the band. just off, behind the curtain, stuff like that. And it's all set on the shore, like with the ocean on one side, which sets up a fantastic reference point. So you're kind of never getting lost, which is another thing that would set him apart from a Michael Bay. But the whole thing is a trap for Wong Fei-hung. The gang has posed as members of the militia, which Wong Fei-hung is kind of the head of, and basically, assaults the audience. But then the people, I believe at this point, the gang has already allied itself with the American contingent headed up by Mr. Jackson, and they open fire just straight up on the crowd and kill a bunch of audience members. But then somehow still Wong Fei-hung is arrested because he was framed. Again, they think it's his militia that's gone nuts. But he begs them to let him stay and treat the wounded, so he does. So it's one of those cinematic puzzles with 100 pieces, it seems like, all of which end up in the right place. It does look fantastic. It's well choreographed. Again, this is where the character work comes in with Lam Sai-wing when he shows up, and his tank fu is just the perfect complement to Jet Li, triple spinning around the place multiple times, ejecting guys left and right. But he wouldn't have, again, been propelled into action if it weren't for Mr. Jackson and his men, who are armed to the teeth. Because the guns in this scene, but also the movie, carry some weight with them. It's part of that encroaching modernity that I mentioned. So it carries some weight. They are referred to and used sparingly, I guess, although there are a few where it seems like they're dodging bullets pretty handily. So all that's great and handled really well. I'll tell you where this movie played a trick on me. So with all of the character development going on, Yen Bio's character, Lang Fung, kind of floats around for a bit of the movie. He gets fired after that incident, actually, because he brought in Porky Wing, who they're both dressed like opera players. And because of that, he goes out in search of a Sifu himself and runs into a man who we did see in one shot previous, but I'm almost discounting that because I believe this whole thing feels a little shoehorned. But in the form of Shandong's Iron Cloth, Yin Jung Teng, played by Yan Shi-kwan, who's actually also been in a bunch. A lot of it was as an extra, so he's in the background more often than not, but he's obviously a gifted martial artist, given what he does in this movie. Like, hands down, gives us quite possibly some of the best sequences in the film. But Yen Bio's character asks him to be his Sifu, and as such, he seeks out Wong Fei-hung to either, he says, be trained by, but you get the feeling he wants to make a name for himself by besting him, which he kind of does in their first fight, but it's because Wong Fei-hung can't devote his full attention to the fight. So they've set up the specter of a rematch later on, because he ends up joining with the Shoho gang. So you could say he himself, like his character, the character of Iron Cloth, is an extension of how evil men are always ready to take advantage of an unsuspecting or unprincipled person. Kind of if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for nothing. If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. So that's my best guess while I'm watching this, even though it feels like such a late edition that I'm like, man, they could have lost this entire thing. The movie is 2 hours long. They could have cut this out entirely. I don't think it would have been that much the less for it. And up until maybe the last 15 minutes, I'm like, this is my one complaint about it, which is still like, yes, this one very good part of this other very good movie it seems like it's not related. That's the best I can do as far as the complaint goes. But by the end, what happens, because he does join up with the Shohu gang, who has already allied themselves with Mr. Jackson's group of slave traders, essentially is what he's doing. Everybody has their allies. Like the governor of the province is also allied, I think, with the British side, and they're all carrying their guns. And they all, let's put it this way, think they're allied with this, except for Wong Fei-hung, who is held out and is, persecuted by all of these alliances, essentially. And even though his knockdown drag out fight at the end with Iron Cloth, which again is fantastic, you know, at the very least, if I'm going to be like, oh, they put this guy in and it seems like he wasn't a part of it early on, it still gave us like our 2 best fights out of this entire movie. So whatever, this is stupid. Because somewhere along the way, perhaps during that Kung Fu fight, I wouldn't be surprised because Wang Fei-hung leaves that fight still calling him Sifu. Even though it turns out that guy was cheating, he had like a blade in his hair, you know, but he spoke of his family's Kung Fu, like he has heritage. And Wang Fei-hung leaves that room, doesn't kill him, you know, definitely wins the fight and rips the dagger out of his hair, humiliates him maybe a little bit, but is like, okay, Sifu, you know, like I gotta go take care of this other thing. And leaves to go rescue Rosamund Kwan. She's been damseled, by the way. But when Iron Cloth leaves that same room, since everything's already kind of hopped off, he is just indiscriminately blown to pieces by the American troops. You know, like you get the feeling they would have done it to one of their own if they had exited at the same time or something like that. So when that happens, again, almost without my knowledge, at that point I'm like, oh, I think they did it. I think he became the symbol that they meant to make him, in whether it's in that moment or before, and it's just all driven home at that time. And Yen Bio, who has adopted him as his Sifu at this point already, is in the background like screaming like Sifu as he's just like, you know, riddled with bullets. And it comes together. It 100% does, in a way I can't fully explain and didn't notice when it was happening. Everything that this movie proposes at the beginning is front and center by the end. This is a movie shot a little bit like Michael Bay shoots movies that still drives the point home, stays spiritually sound. Like you kind of have your cake and eat it too with this thing, I guess is the top level analysis. I don't know. I knew this was going to be hard to talk about, so who knows if I actually did it, but enjoyed the heck out of the entire thing. Like Once Upon a Time in China, I can't wait for the sequels, I guess, even though I hear it's diminishing returns somewhat, but whatever. Looking forward to watching some more. Speaking of which, next week, if everything goes according to plan, which it often does not, I could be talking about maybe, I'll keep saying maybe, that way if I don't, I've got all my bases covered, but Twin Dragons, which is not only directed also by Choi Hark, it's also directed by Ringo Lam. So yes, we've skipped over all of the actual Ringo Lam movies, like his greatest ever in the On Fire trilogy and whatnot, and gone straight to Twin Dragons. So all apologies there. It will probably at least be, I bet, more in line with what we saw in Aces Go Places 4, but either way, if it's not that, it'll be hard-boiled, and I have seen that before, so that would probably be something I bring the family in for. So, and then actually, Once Upon a Time in China 2, not far away, and I think 3 came out in that same year, but it's actually not on my list, so maybe I will still be able to make a combo show out of something here. I don't know. So if you too don't know, like and subscribe. Go over to Patreon, PayPal, where you can really stick it to me. Teach me a lesson about finances along with these kind folks.